WarsawJS.
So yeah, hello. My name is Vadym, and I am a front-end developer in Evolution Gaming. So who are we? Evolution is a product company whose main focus is online casino solutions. In our case, it's online casino games. So when I'm talking about the games, so how did it all started? Well, at first we had a couple of games, and we had to pick a technology to use to build our games. And at that time, React was a thing, and it was completely okay with our needs, and so we stick to that. Well, everyone was sticking to React, and since our games are quite complex on the front end side, we needed some state management tool, so we picked up Redux. Easy choice, right? I'm going to show you a couple of our games we have. Well, these are live games. What are those? Well, we have a lot of studios all around the globe, and the studio has its own. All of them have its own setup of cameras and table games and etc. And these streams from these tables are streamed to the player, and we build an UI on top of that stream, so the user can interact with the game. User can see the result of the game, he can bet at some bet spots, and etc. So our first couple or few games were the classic ones of the casino: the roulette, blackjack, and baccarat. And even though they were looking different, there were a lot of common components you may spot it. For example, these buttons on top that may trigger some settings, volume change, and etc. These buttons and the chat window, the timer, the balance control buttons, and the lobby buttons, for example, and of course, chip stack. So the logical decision would be, hey, since we use that across our games, we have to move them to some separate library of components, right? And we did that. But together with all those simple visual representational components, there were also a lot of logic behind the scenes that was built using Redux and Redux as well, Redux and React as well. So together with all the components, we moved huge chunks of the logic to the common library. So over the time, we needed more and more games. And well, we had a small problem with that library of components. Whenever we start a new game, we had to build, we had to compose all the layout and the game by using those components. And you know, when you develop a lot of the games over a short period of time, building all of those layouts may be a hassle, right? So we decided, hey, we need our own Create React app, but for the Evolution games. So then we can move all of that hassle to some black box. We'll just build all the common part for ourselves. And we call that the abstract game. Well, the main purpose of that was that we would put all of that common functionality and common complex components to some black box that game developers can use, initialize, and then forget about that and just focus on the game development. So out of that box, we would initialize basically components, the transport, the chat, the very complex balance handling, and the video handling as well. So then the time of the starting of development of a new game would be really shortened. So how would that look from a game developer perspective? Well, basically, you start a new game, you create a new package, you build some config to be able to customize some parts. Because even though there are a lot of common components, there will be a necessity of somehow customizing them, because there is no limit of the creativity of our designers and people who are thinking about our next new games. So you create a config, you basically feed that to the create abstract game method, and that will return the transport and other useful things that we use across our games. and the root of the game, not of the game, but of the abstract game, where you can put your game, basically, and that will handle for you a lot of things. For example, all the layout will be built, all the buttons, etc., etc. So you are focused on the game development itself. So at that point, we had a pretty solid base, which we called, abstract game, core of all of our games. And that gave a huge benefit that if we improve that or modify, all the games from across our portfolio will get the changes. But then the question arises, how would the game communicate with the abstract game, with the core functionality? For example, if game wants to know if the chat is opened or not, or maybe game would need to know about if the video quality has dropped, or the game would want to change the video quality, how would they communicate with each other? Well, the solution is simple. Since the abstract game is built with Redux and React, the game can communicate through the typical Redux elements, like the game can dispatch some actions to the abstract game. The abstract game would react, and so on and so forth. And the abstract game state will be changed accordingly to those actions. And the game can listen to those. And the game can also listen to the actions that abstract game dispatches, and use that in the game's middlewares. So imagine that we used that approach for a couple of years, right? Our code base grows. The complexity of the abstract game also grows significantly. And it's all good. It's all good. It all works. The speed of development of new games skyrockets, and we enjoy that. But there are some problems, maybe obvious problems, but well, we are in progress, so we didn't see them at some time. First of all, that both the game and the abstract game are really dependent on the technology stack. So since we are using React and Redux for the abstract game, all the new games would need to use React and Redux to get all the benefits of the abstract game. And tight coupling. Well, that means that all of the games would need to import some actions from the abstract game in order to have a possibility to interact with abstract game, and vice versa. So yeah, it's very tight coupling. And the testing complexity. That's also a huge problem when you need to test some chunk of your game's logic together with the abstract game. You would have to I don't know, mock a part of this abstract game store or do some actions every time. So this is hard. This is hard. And a solution to those problems that we came up with was the abstract game API. I know there is a lot of words abstract, but yeah. So the abstract game API. So the main idea was to decouple this technology dependency. So instead of importing all that Redux elements to every other game, we decided to create a library or framework agnostic API that would help us to get rid of all of that. I know it may look a bit complex, but still. So abstract game API, it would take a responsibility of from one side, it would expose some values and actions to all of the games, and instead of importing all that Redux elements, we would use a single abstract game API instance for all that games, and that's it. All of these games would not know about what framework or what technology is used behind that. So abstract game would keep our existing abstract games Redux store in sync with these exposed values, and then done. We don't have this dependency on the Redux for our games. So yeah, okay, there was a fancy animation. So yeah, the abstract game API is modular thing, and it represents its modules represent slices of the Redux store, where the Redux state fields will be represented as observable values, and instead of Redux actions, we would have a simple methods that would modify those values. So why observables? Well, apart from all the benefits, I would like to highlight that they are reactive, they are framework agnostic. So now the game would not need to keep in mind that it has to have Redux or something like that, and it can use whatever they want. And it's pretty widely used. So now it's quite common technology. So whoever new comes to the company, he would know how to work with the abstract game API because, well, it's observables, it's everywhere. And now a bit more to the technical questions. So we have that abstract game built on React and Redux. We have an abstract game API on observables. And how do we keep those exposed values from the abstract game API and in sync with that our core functionality? So the solution was pretty straightforward at that time. So abstract game API would subscribe to the store updates of our existing Redux store through the Redux subscribe method, surprise, surprise. And whenever the subscriber will be triggered, we will just update all of our observable values, and the game will get, and the game observers will be notified about the changes. So now we solve the problem of keeping that state in sync. But how the game can communicate with the abstract game, in this case, if we throw out throughout the actions, Redux actions. Well, this is even more complex, but I will try to explain that. So let's consider a scenario when the game needs to open a pop-up. So what does it do? It calls abstract game open pop-up method. Abstract game in its own turn, since it handles all that Redux relations, dispatches that action to the Redux store. Then Redux store updates, maybe some middlewares will be triggered, and etc. It updates that value, and then the previous scenario happens. The store subscribers gets triggered, the observable value gets updated, and then the game gets the updated value. For now, let's see how the code would be changed. In our example, I will show you super oversimplified component, which will just trigger pop-up if it's toggle pop-up. So if it's shown, it just hides pop-up, and when it's hidden, it shows pop-up. So here on the left side, you can see the example of how would it be built with Redux. So you see that we have imported dispatch and selector from React Redux. We have all that stuff imported from our core functionality, the selector and action creators. And well, basically the toggle function is super simple. You either dispatch this or dispatch that. With the abstract game API, it would change a bit. You see that all the Redux stuff has been thrown away. Instead, we import two hooks that I will talk about on the next slide. And well, we do basically the same. So visually, the readability of the code didn't change much, right? So we just subscribe to some value update, the current pop-ups in our case, and we use pop-ups module from the abstract game. And well, we do the same magic. So these are also super simplified representation of those hooks. The UseIG would basically just take abstract game instance from the context, and UseIG value is the hook that is used to have to subscribe and unsubscribe to the observable value from the abstract game API. So over the years, we created tens of games, and abstract game API, abstract game helped us to do that. And it grew too, and the complexity grew too. But you know, time flies by pretty fast. The technology are evolving. We are evolving too. And there was some point then where we had to, make another step. And the abstract game API helped us to do that. That basically untie the hands of our game developers in terms of the framework or technology choice, because yeah, it's a pretty library and technology agnostic. That's it. Thank you.
Testing, testing, 1, 2. Wow, that was very concise, and I think the people liked it a lot. Let's see if anyone has any questions. Of course you do, naturally. Okay, I'm left-handed, so good luck, Anya. There you go.
I have a tight grip. Okay, so I like the presentation, and the question I have is the separation of the React Redux logic with the original concept for the abstract game and the API is nice if you want to use a different framework, is nice if you want to have a different approach. But if you do decide to use a different framework or a different approach, you incur I think, heavy cost in terms of performance and bundle size, because you now have 2 frameworks and 2 stores and 2 of everything. How do you deal with that?
Well, first of all of our code is, as you said, separated to chunks, and we really value the performance in our company. But well, in our case, we didn't yet move from the React. Still, we have at this time we have moved just from the Redux for our games. I think that will be a question for future. How would we manage the different libraries that we include, and etc. But this is a gradual step-by-step approach, and we just making these steps in such a direction, and we are going to solve them one by one. So at first we just separate from this dependency, and later on we'll deal with chunks and performance too. I hope that somehow answers the question.
Next question.
Yeah, hello. Really nice presentation. So as I understood, you kinda, as you mentioned from your speech, you are in progress every time you are doing code. You're progressing in games, more games, more games, and you're trying to build, from my point of view, for now, a complex solution to do another games. If you will need to change the logic in abstract game, you will spend lots of time to do it because it's already grown a lot and it's already complex. Have you tried to reconsider like a little bit of the approaches, like from the startups world, when you build MVP and it's working, it's kind of proving your business idea, you reconsider it, you trying to build for the specific business cases. And as I can see, maybe you can reconsider, like, to build it more easily with less, I don't know, dependencies, so on.
Yeah, that's really nice question. Thank you. So when you mentioned the complexity of the abstract game, it's worth to mention how huge that is, to be honest, and how many problems does it solve for us. For example, like all of our games have to handle a lot of things similarly, and we cannot just throw it away and just build something from scratch. We have so many integrations on that side, and well, so many huge logical pieces that would have to be reused across all of the games. Of course, there are some MVPs and so on that we are considering, and some new technologies and etc. But for the broad-wise usage, we cannot go further away from what we have now at this moment.
That sounded like a very complex question. I should, full disclosure, I am not a programmer or a developer. However, I'm learning a lot every single time I attend one of these meetings. And I can even speak almost intelligently on the topic.
So as you operate an online casino, how do you deal with the guys who win too much, and not based on proximity, but based on the way that they are trying to cheat in online casinos?
There is no way of cheating in online casinos.
You have
Yeah,
an answer
really.
to the answer?
Basically, you can write some bots or whatever, but there is no way of actually cheating in those games.
Doesn't stop people from trying.
Sorry? Cheating is hacking game logic, right? Is that what you meant by cheating? Yeah, so there is no way of that.
Anyone else have any questions? How many gamers, how many people are designing games, building games in the room? Too scared. I don't blame you. It seems like a very complicated process, and thank you for explaining and giving that presentation. If they have any more questions, they can talk to you later. Yes? Thank you very much. Give them a big hand, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.